Hello and welcome to the CBSE Class 11 English course here on SWS. I hope you have gone through many videos before, also gone through the notes and the question and answers. Today we'll be covering the chapter called Birth, written by A.J. Cronin, who himself was a doctor, also a Scottish novelist. This chapter, Birth, is actually an excerpt. Excerpt means a part of a novel called The Citadel. Citadel means a fort kind of a thing. And it's a story of a young doctor, a remarkable young doctor called Dr. Andrew Mason, who saves two lives, that of a mother and a newborn child, both of who are in a critical condition. And the doctor himself is going through some kind of a personal crisis. So in that sense, there is a lot of drama which takes place through the night. Okay, so in that sense, a very fascinating and one of the stories that I really like, which is part of your class 11 English syllabus. So just read the note, the author's note, as it were, some kind of a backgrounder which has been given, because remember, it says excerpt, it's not the entire story in itself, right? So they have given some detail in the introductory note, which is important. It says that Dr. Andrew Mason, newly out of medical school, has just begun his medical practice as an assistant to Dr. Edward Page. This is an important detail in the small Welsh mining town of Blaney. Okay, Welsh is the word for Wales. Wales is one of the provinces, states of the United Kingdom of Britain. I actually studied in Cardiff, which is in Wales. Blaney is believed to be a fictitious town, and as Dr. Mason is returning from a disappointing evening with Christine, his girlfriend, the girl he loves, he's met by Joy Morgan. Now, Joe and his wife have been married for nearly 20 years and are expecting their first child. The delivery of their first child is due after 20 years of marriage. So you can imagine the sense of expectation, the sense of anticipation, the sense of anxiety, right? As far as Joe and his wife Susan are concerned, and also we realize Susan Morgan's mother. Okay, so shall we start? Shuru kare. I would keep what I've done is, for those of you who would want to read the summary of the story before you get on to the main story, I've written it in 5 broad points so that it's easier for you to kind of understand. So you could do that as well. Okay, I've written it in about 4 to 5 points. 5 points. Also the protagonist of the story, there's a note, and also the word meanings have been given. In any case, un sabko main explain karta chalunga. Though it was nearly midnight, because summary bolne se, it's like, telling you the story and then reading the entire story. So it's like, knowing a story of a movie before you go to see a movie. So let's get on with the story itself. Though it was nearly midnight when Andrew reached Brentgower, he found, now that's a place where he lives. Okay, he found Joe Morgan waiting for him. Joe Morgan is a driller who is waiting for Dr. Andrew Mason, walking up and down with short steps between the closed surgery, his clinic, and the entrance to the house. At the sight of him, the burly, now the burly means a large, heavily set man, slightly on the heavier, stout side. Driller is someone who's involved with drilling work. Face expressed relief. Okay, finally, now I see and meet the doctor. Hey, doctor, I'm glad to see you. I have been back and forward here last 1 hour. So he has been waiting for him for the last 1 hour. The Mrs. wants ye. Ye, I mean, is a way of saying you. Before time too. Before time probably here is a reference to the fact that her delivery time is due a little before the due date. Andrew, abruptly recalled from the contemplation of his own affairs, told Morgan to wait. Okay, contemplation means deep, reflective thought. Okay, now Andrew abruptly recalled means here that he's forced out of his own personal thoughts. He's engrossed, वो अपने ख्यालों में, अपने ही personal matters के ख्यालों में खोया हुआ है. He went into the house for his bag, and then together they set out for number 12 Blaina Terrace. That's the address of Joe Morgan. The night air was cool and deep with quiet mystery. There is absolute quiet, usually so perceptive. Perceptive means someone who has a lot of insight, who understands. Andrew now felt dull and listless. He was feeling very exhausted and tired. He had no premonition. Premonition usually means some feeling of what is going to happen, कि आगे क्या होने वाला है उसके बारे में एक sixth sense, and usually it is something negative. It is used in negative sense. I don't know why I'm having a pain in the throat. That this night call would prove unusual, still less that it would influence his whole future in Blandly. That he was having a premonition कि आज जो होने वाला है it is going to be rather unusual, और इससे उसके पूरे भविष्य पर, उसके पूरे फ्यूचर पर जो उसके ब्लेनली टाउन में है उस पर काफी फर्क पड़ सकता है. The two men walked in silence until they reached the door of number 12. Then Joe drew up short. Drew up short का मतलब है come to a halt. वो अंदर नहीं जाता है. I will not come in, he said, and his voice showed signs of strain, that he was feeling a little anxious. But man, I know you will do well for us. But मेरे को तुम पर भरोसा है, डॉक्टर के ऊपर भरोसा है. Inside, a narrow stair led up to a small bedroom, clean but poorly furnished, which means they were not very well off, and lit only by an oil lamp. These are small details which you can remember, underline, mark, or write it down in a separate notebook. Here, Mrs. Morgan's mother, a tall, gray-haired woman of nearly 70, and the stout, elderly midwife. Midwife is some kind of a nurse who would be semi-trained, not fully trained as a nurse, but she knows how to assist during childbirth. Okay, waited beside the patient, watching Andrew's expression as he moved around about the room. You know, Andrew room ke andar gaya, so he saw the mother-in-law who is nearly 70 years old and the midwife. Let me make you a cup of tea, Dr. Bach, said the former quickly. Former means the mother-in-law after a few moments. Back is a term of endearment, fondness में बोला जाता है. Andrew smiled faintly. No, he just gave a very dull kind of a smile. There is not too much of enthusiasm in the smile. He saw that the old woman, wise in experience, realized that there must be a period of waiting, that she was afraid he would leave the case, saying he would return later. Mother-in-law को पता चला कि इस केस में थोड़ा वेटिंग है. That is, Susan's delivery is expected only after a few hours maybe. तो उसमें उसको लगा कि डॉक्टर बोलेगा कि मैं वापस जाके आता हूं, and she did not want that. She did not want any kind of emergency, right? So she was afraid that he would leave the case, यानी कि वो छोड़ के चला जाएगा, बाद में आऊंगा बोलेगा. So she wanted to give him tea, offer him tea, so that she keeps him engaged in the house. Don't fret. Fret matlab don't worry, mother, I will not run away. He was able to read what was going on in her mind. Down in the kitchen, he drank the tea which she gave him. Overwrought as he was, overwrought means anxious as he was, he knew he could not snatch even an hour's sleep if he went home. अगर आपसे क्वेश्चन पूछा जाए that why did he not go home, so ये तीनों reasons आप लिखिए, जिसका मैं अभी बताऊंगा, और ये मैंने क्वेश्चन आंसर में भी लिखा हुआ है. Okay, that he would not be able to snatch even an hour's sleep if he went home. He also knew that this particular case could be a difficult case and it would demand all his attention. He was already having some kind of a premonition. And number 3, a cure. Cure means strange. Lethargy of spirit. Lethargy of spirit means tiredness came about him. So he's also feeling very tired, and probably he did not want to walk back to his house all over again. So he decided to remain until everything was over. An hour later, he went upstairs again, noted the progress made, came down once more. So ऊपर गया, patient को देखा, and then he came down once again. Sat by the kitchen fire. Okay, it was still except for the rustle of a cinder in the grate. Now, rustle in the cinder of a grate means it's a muffled crackling sound, because the coal or the wood which is burning makes some kind of a tup kind of a sound, you know, when it is burnt over a particular temperature, right? Grate is where it is all kept, and the slow tick tock of the wall clock. So you can imagine when do you register the sound of the wall clock? Tuck, tuck, when it is absolutely quiet. It's absolutely quiet there inside the house. No, but there was another sound, he says. This beat of Morgan's footsteps. Now, it is so quiet that he can even hear the sound of Joe Morgan's footsteps outside the house. as he paced in the street outside. So he was also anxious and tense. So he was walking up and down there. The old woman opposite him, that is the mother-in-law, sat in her black dress, quite motionless, that is, not moving around. Her eyes strangely alive and wise, probing. Probing means inquiring, almost like making an inquiry, looking very closely, never leaving his face. She's looking at him very, very closely, looking at the doctor. His thoughts were heavy, muddled. Heavy and muddled means that, very confused. And, it was kind of weighing on his mind. Whatever was going on in his mind, his own personal thoughts about his own personal life was kind of, एक भार था उसका उसके दिमाग पर. The episode he had witnessed at Cardiff Station. Cardiff, as I just mentioned, is the biggest city in Wales, right? It has beautiful stadium, Cardiff University, where I studied. So in that sense, pretty familiar with the place. Beautiful city, about 4 to 5 hours of driving distance from London. Still obsessed him morbidly. Morbidly means thinking in a very disturbed manner with almost very negative kind of thoughts. He thought of Bramwell, who is a friend of his, foolishly devoted to a woman who deceived him sordidly. So his wife was having an affair with someone else, and Bramwell, but he still was devoted to her, was still in love with her, right? Of Edward Page, with who he worked, bound to the shrewish Blodwen, right? Shrewish means someone who is, a very negative kind of a character. Of Denny, another friend, living unhappily apart from his wife, separated from his wife. Now he has talked about these three friends. इनके की आप नाम याद रखिएगा: Bramwell, Edward Page, and Denny. His reason told him that all these marriages were dismal failures, were completely failed marriages. He wished to consider marriage as an idyllic state. Idyllic means something very beautiful. Yes. And he said, yes, he could not otherwise consider it with the image of Christine. Christine ke bare mein socha tha. So it was what he thought of marriage. It was therefore the conflict. Her eyes shining towards him admitted no other conclusion. लेकिन जब वो अपने तीनों दोस्तों के बारे में देखता था, and then he would think about Christine, there was this conflict arising in his mind. It was the conflict between his level doubting mind. He was a level-headed person, but he was also having these doubts, right? And his overflowing heart, which left him resentful and confused. The mind was saying something, the heart was saying something totally different, and that was leaving him very confused. He let his chin sink upon his chest, so his body language also showed his mind, his rather confused state of mind. Stretched out his legs, stared broodingly. Brooding means, you keep looking at the fire, your mind is somewhere, mind is almost blank, you're just brooding. That's what is called brooding. Into the fire, you're just looking at the fire, so you're not focusing sharp because your mind is elsewhere. And his thoughts were so filled with Christine that he started when the started means यहाँ पे startled or started का मतलब एक ही है, when the old woman opposite suddenly addressed him. Her meditation had pursued a different course. Now she had something else to say. Susan said not to give her the chloroform if it would harm the baby. Now chloroform is something which you give for anesthesia, right? To kind of ensure that you don't feel the pain, you don't feel the entire process, your mind and body goes numb. She's awful set upon this child, Dr. Buck. Her old eyes warmed at a sudden thought because she's thinking about the grandchild. She added in a low tone, we all are. I fancy that, everyone is expecting to see the newborn child. He collected himself with an effort. He said it won't do any harm. The anesthetic, he said kindly, they will be all right. Anesthesia se फर्क नहीं पड़ेगा. There will be no harm done to the baby or the mother as a result of the chloroform. Here the nurse's voice was heard calling from the top landing, from upstairs. Andrew glanced at the clock, which now showed 3:30. So it's 3:30 a.m. He rose and went up to the bedroom. He perceived that he might now begin with his work, that the time for the delivery of the child had come. An hour elapsed. It became 4:30. It was a long, harsh struggle. Then as the first streaks of dawn, it's just about to be sunbreak. straight past the broken edges of the blind, through the window, through the blinds, as the first rays of sun are coming. The child was born, but the child was lifeless. As he gazed at this still form, a shiver of horror passed over Andrew. And that's why you always say doctor's life is not easy. A doctor's life is never easy. You are dealing with life. Engineers, journalists, doctors, professors, uh, advertising agency, copywriters, filmmakers, nobody deals with life, but a doctor does. So whoever is planning to become a doctor, be extremely conscious of the huge responsibility that is on your shoulders. Huge respect for doctors. As he gazed at the still form, of a shiver of horror passed over Andrew. After all, he had promised, that everything will be all right. He had promised the mother-in-law just a couple of hours ago. His face heated with his own exertions because he had worked hard to get the baby out. Chilled suddenly, he was feeling cold. He hesitated, torn between his desire to attempt to resuscitate the child and his obligation towards the mother, who was herself in a desperate state. The child was born stillborn, not breathing, and the mother herself was not in a good shape. The dilemma was so urgent that he did not solve it consciously. Blindly, instinctively, he gave the child to the nurse and turned his attention to Susan Morgan, who now lay collapsed, almost pulseless. Her pulse was not kind of working and not yet out of the ether upon her side. His haste was desperate, a frantic race against her ebbing strength. Ebbing means strength going down. It took him uh, only an instant to smash a glass ampule, right? The injection jisme hota hai, and inject the medicine. Then he flung down the hypodermic syringe and worked unsparingly to restore the flaccid. Flaccid means soft and hanging loose. She's almost lifeless. After a few minutes of feverish effort, massive effort, her heart strengthened and she was able to breathe again. The pulse returned. He saw that he might safely leave her because she was now breathing and safe. Her heartbeat was normal. He swung round in his shirt sleeves, his hair sticking to the damp bro. His hair was out to his bro. Where is the child? The midwife made a frightened gesture because she had placed it beneath the bed. In a flash, Andrew knelt down. He looked beneath the bed, fishing amongst sodden newspapers, wet kind of newspapers below the bed. He pulled out the child, a boy perfectly formed. The limp, warm body. The body was warm, but it was limp because it was not having breathing, was white and soft as tallow. Tallow is the hard fat of animals melted and used to make soaps and candles. The cord hastily stashed, the umbilical cord, which was kind of snapped, lay like a broken stem. The skin was of a lovely texture, very smooth and tender. The head lolled because the head is never firm of a newborn. You have to hold it from here because the neck is not fully formed. The limbs seemed boneless. Still kneeling, Andrew stared at the child with a haggard frown. Haggard means tired and irritated and frowning. The whiteness meant only one thing because there was no blood movement. So the body was white. It meant asphyxia, right? Asphyxia is suffocation or an unconscious state due to the lack of oxygen. And that leads to weak pulse and paleness of the skin, which is why the white skin. Unnaturally tense, raced back to a case he once had seen in the Samaritan. Now, Samaritan may have been a case of a television show, which is being referred to out here, to the treatment that had been used. Instantly, he was on his feet. Get me hot water and cold water, because he remembered what had been done there in that show in order to save a newborn. He threw out to the nurse, means he called out, said loud, and basins too, quick, quick. But doctor, she faltered, her eyes on the pallid body. Pallid means pale. Quick, snatching a blanket, he laid the child upon it and began the special method of respiration. The basins arrived, the ewer. Ewer means a large jug with a wide mouth. A big iron kettle. Frantically, he splashed cold water into one basin, into the other. He mixed water as hot as his hand could bear. So hot and cold water he kind of mixed. Then, like some crazy juggler, mixing both hot and cold water, he hurried the child between the two, now plunging it into the ice, now into the steaming bath. Ice, steam, ice, steam. He kind of did that. 15 minutes passed. We are around 5 o'clock now, right? Sweat was now running into Andrew's eyes, blinding him. One of his sleeves hung down, dripping. His breath came pantingly, but no breath came from the lax body of the child. Lax is, again, a very pale kind of a body. A desperate sense of defeat pressed on him, a raging hopelessness. He felt the midwife watching him in stark consternation. Consternation means a look of dismay and anxiety, a bit of fear. Ki ye kar kya raha hai, doctor? Okay, because it's a special method which she has not been aware of. While they are pressed back against the wall where she had all the time remained, her hand pressed to her throat, uttering no sound, her eyes burning about him, because if she's looking at him was the old woman, the mother-in-law. He remembered her longing for a grandchild as great as had been her daughter's longing, both the mother and the grandmother, right, of the newborn, all dashed away now, futile, beyond remedy. So he was kind of feeling कि इसमें hope नहीं है, बच्चे को बचा नहीं पाएगा. The floor was now a draggled mess. Draggled means dirty or wet. Stumbling upon a sopping towel which was wet, Andrew almost dropped the child, which was now wet and slippery in his hands, like a strange white fish. That's how a newborn baby looks. For mercy's sake, doctor, whimpered the midwife. It's stillborn, hoga nahi kuch kind of thing. She's very pessimistic about it. Andrew did not listen to her. Beaten, despairing, having labored in vain for almost half an hour, he still persisted in one last effort, rubbing the child with a rough towel, crushing and releasing the little chest, the chest ko dabane ka, with both his hands, trying to get breath into that limp body, somehow get the baby to breathe. And then, as a miracle, the pygmy means the small chest, which his hands enclosed, he had held with his hands, gave a short convulsive heave. There was a heave. That means there was breathing happening inside. Another and another. Andrew turned giddy. God, I'm getting goosebumps. As though chakkar aa raha tha. The sense of life which was there in his hands, springing beneath his fingers. Uske haathon ki, uske ungliyon ke andar life was coming out. After all that unavailing striving means trying, was so exquisite, something so magical, it almost made him faint. Right? He redoubled his efforts. Now usko lag raha tha abhi wo bacche ko bacha payega. He redoubled his efforts feverishly. Feverishly means very vigorously. The child was gasping now, deeper and deeper. So the breathing was happening inside the little child's body. A bubble of mucus came from one tiny nostril, a joyful iridescent. Iridescent means showing luminous colors, almost like a bubble. The limbs were no longer boneless. The head was no longer lay back spinelessly. So there was some kind of firmness. The blanched skin, the kind of pale skin was now turning pink. The white skin was now turning pink. Then exquisitely, beautifully came the child's cry. They always say a newborn child should be made to cry so that the lungs open up. So that the lungs open up and the breathing happens. That's what a doctor, a gynecologist will always say. Dear Father in heaven, the nurse sobbed hysterically, it's come alive. So she thanks the God and she says, the child has come alive. Andrew handed her the child, but he felt weak. He felt weak and dazed. About him, the room lay in a shuddering litter, this complete mess. Blankets, towels, basins, soiled instruments, the hypodermic syringe impaled by its point in the linoleum, medical terms. You were knocked over, the kettle on its side in a puddle of water. Upon the huddled bed, the mother still dreamed her way quietly through the anesthetic because she was still under the effect of chloroform. The old woman still stood against the wall, but her hands were together. Her lips moved without sound. She was praying. She was thanking the Lord. Mechanically, Andrew wrung out his sleeve, so shirts ke sleeves, and pulled on his jacket. Full sleeve kiya, jacket pehna. I'll fetch my bag later. That I'll come and collect my bag later. He went downstairs through the kitchen into this scullery. Scullery is the room for washing dishes. His lips was dry because obviously his throat was parched because he had done something which would have been considered impossible. At the scullery, he took a long drink of water. He reached for his hat and coat. Outside, he found Joe, the father, the new father, standing on the pavement with a tense, expectant face. He's obviously wants to know what happened. Uh, all right, Joe, he said thickly, both all right. That is, both mother and the child are all right. It was quite light, nearly 5 o'clock. A few miners, because it's a mining town, right, were already in the streets, the first of the night shift, that they were returning after the night shift and they were going back home. As Andrew walked with them, spent and slow. Spent means his energy has been spent. He's tired, exhausted, and therefore he's walking slowly. His footfalls, okay, his footsteps echoing with the others, almost in sync with the footsteps of the miners under the morning sky. He kept thinking blindly, oblivious to all the other work that he had done in blindly. Oblivious means abhi tak ka jitna bhi kaam kiya tha, uske bare mein he was not thinking. He was thinking about what had happened in the last few hours. I've done something, oh God, I've done something real at last. So he feels that he has achieved something. He has done something which has been a miracle, which has been a real big, glorious achievement. He has saved 2 lives, the mother and the newborn child. I hope you enjoyed the story. I enjoyed explaining the story. Okay, I really liked it. I think this is one of the best stories that you have in your class 11 syllabus. Okay, so please go through the notes. Please go through the question and answers. The word meanings are also given if you want to refer to them again. Thank you very much for watching.